Today's topic is tracking and reporting, the key to effective compliance. Now, having been an executive director, I will just start off by saying typically nothing is exciting about compliance, right? I mean, I'm just keeping it real. Compliance, blah. But what I have learned over the years is if you have your tracking and reporting in place, if it's set up the right way, compliance really can be streamlined to a way so it's not feeling like a root canal. And I'm telling you, root canals are very painful, and I've had very bad experiences. For those of you just joining for the first time, my name is Amber Wynn. I am a philanthropreneur. I fuse passion and commitment of philanthropy with proven business practices from every sector that I've been in, which is nonprofit, academia, government, and corporate. I have founded my own nonprofit. I've been a pretty successful grant writer. My largest grant is for 3.2 million. My most recent was for 2.4 million. I have been a reviewer and a funder giving out 7 million annually. And I have partnered with Latino Coalition to provide you guys with some capacity building workshops that I have been having a ball doing. I hope for those of you who joined me every week, that you've enjoyed it, that it's provided you with some information to strengthen your leadership skills, to move your organization forward, because that is my purpose for being here. Today, as I said, we're going to talk about reporting and tracking and how it drives effective compliance, how to leverage reporting as a funding strategy, and what systems you need to develop an effective reporting structure. The way this works is I'm going to talk, but if ever you have a question, please just, hey, Amber, I got a question, because this is for you. So I want to make sure that I'm being responsive. And if you wait to the end, both you and I probably would forget. So feel free to jump in and ask questions. We're going to start off with reporting. But before I start, what percentage of compliance is attributed to a nonprofit's sustainability? You think? Drop in the text, give me a percentage. What percentage of compliance in your mind is attributed to a nonprofit's sustainability? What do you think? Just take a guess. Thank you, Chris. Hey, Veronica. Hey, Aubrey. Well, in all actuality, compliance, and I'll throw in there donor cultivation, is like 50% of your sustainability strategy, or at least it should be, right? Because we had this whole strategy, if you guys joined me last week, where we talked about sustainability and unrestricted funds and restricted funds. But a lot of times people don't really acknowledge how compliance plays a huge role in the organization's sustainability. We're going to dive into that, but I will say this. Once you have the money, that's 90% of the battle. And what typically happens is people will get the money and then they will lose the money because of compliance. So you get this grant, $250,000. Somewhere along the line, you may have moved some money over to cover, whatever, and now you don't have the money, but you had the money. So if you look at it as, 90% of the battle is getting the money, then you take that other 10% and you cultivate it. So the funder has taken a risk on you. That's how they see it. And now your job is to say, continue to fund me, so that you don't have to every fiscal year go out and look for new money. And the program officer plays a huge role in that. I remember when I first started working at Cal State Fullerton, my faculty were like, not talking to their program officers. I'm like, boo, what is your problem? Like, coming from the government sector, I kept relationships with my program officers. The program officer is important as it relates to compliance because, the foundations come from corporations, they come from individual donors. They come from a variety of sources. And the foundation board is responsible for delegating that money. But the program officer is responsible for their portfolio of nonprofits. They make the recommendations on who to give the money to. They're also responsible for vetting the organizations. And so it's important to understand the relationship part of being in relationship with your program officer. So the foundation dollars are divvied out. The board determines where it's going to go. The program officer is responsible for identifying, vetting, and managing their portfolio of nonprofits, and it goes to the nonprofit. But then what happens is that the nonprofit has to report their measurable goals and objectives and outcomes to the program officer, who then has to stand in front of the board and say, this nonprofit is doing amazing work. They've done X, Y, and Z LMOP. And then the board of directors have to report back out to the people who actually gave them the money. And if you understand this process, then it sort of shifts the way that, well, for me anyway, it shifted the way that I viewed compliance. It's like if you give your child, you know, what do you give them every week? Chores. Yeah, the money for their chores, right? You're not going to just keep handing them money and they're not doing their chores. You're like, I see dirty dishes. I see, that the floors haven't been mopped. You're not going to continue to give them money. But if they're doing their chores regularly, it's a relationship. You do your chores, I give you money. You do your reporting, then I continue to fund you. So instead of looking at it as it's some type of punitive, painful thing, if you look at it in relationship to what each person has to do, the program officer has to look good in front of the board. So they need to know what to report out, what challenges, and all of those things. So it's just important to understand what funders want. There's no such thing as free money. Like my eye starts to twitch when people say, yeah, I want to get some of that free money. Nothing about grant money, funder money is free. It's not, right? At the end of the day, funders want something that is tangible, measurable, and quantifiable to demonstrate that their investment in you was a good return. What they want is proof, right? They want proof that the funds were used as you said you were going to use them, proof that a positive change occurred in your community, proof that they made a good investment. Because let's just keep it real, they don't really know you initially. And so they have to demonstrate that they made a good choice to fund you. At the end of the day, it's about demonstrating proof. And so that's what we're going to talk about. But when we talk about the program officer, I am going to say that having a relationship with your program officer is probably one of the most important parts of tracking and reporting. What do I mean by that? Well, at the end of the day, funders are not obligated to renew your grant. They can fund you for that program period, and that's it. So your goal is to be a good grantee, to be responsive, meaning turning your reports in early, not on time. Having been a program officer, I'm going to tell you, if you want to be a good grantee, if you really want to cultivate your relationship with your program officer, don't turn your reports on time, turn them in early, because inevitably there are going to be a chunk of people who turn them on time and then a chunk of people who are going to turn them in late. But if you're that organization that turns them in early, then it allows them the opportunity to look at your report and say, ooh, Amber, this is great, but can you this, right? When they're turned in on time, when they're turned in late, then the program officer doesn't have the opportunity to do that. You want to provide them with success stories, because when they're standing in front of the board, they want to be able to say, my portfolio of, nonprofits are amazing. And so when you give them success stories, you can say, this was a great investment because, Garden Pathways graduated 16 individuals with this money and right? Give them success stories so they can toot your horn in front of the board when they're reporting out. You also want to do things like give them visibility. Unless they specifically say in your agreement that they don't want to be acknowledged, there are some organizations that don't. And they typically don't because they practice unsolicited grants. So if you put them out there, then people are going to come ask them for grants, and they don't want to do that. But if they don't say that, guess what? Funders want people to know that they're giving. They want people to associate them with change in community. So you put them on your community partners page on your website. Every once in a while, do a shout out on social media, do a press release, make sure that there's signage at your events, pump them up, do an article on them in your newsletter. Because what happens is when they have this extra money, your program officer is going to be like, let's give that money to Amber. And they're going to do it because you're giving them, the visibility that they want. Donor cultivation is important. So you need to get to know your program officer and turn him or her into your ambassador. You want them saying, oh yeah, here's the thing. Funders, they all run in the same circle. That's why you typically see the same organization getting the, funding. How do they always get the money? It's because there's a small circle. And here's what we do. We say, stay away from Amber Wynn. She has been a nightmare. And they're like, what? Girl, let me tell you, she can't turn her report in on time. If the Messiah came down and paid her, what? So they already know. Likewise, though, they're like, oh my gosh, we have this. Have you heard of Amber Wynn? She is awesome. She this, she that. And they're like, what? And then they go, hey, I heard about you. We're interested. So it is a small community. And you want to make sure that they are singing your praises, right? Make sure that you talk to your program officer monthly. People are like, Amber, I don't have time for that. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Let me tell you what happened when I talked to my program officer monthly. My program officer's name was Geeti, right? This is when I worked for Congresswoman Maxine Waters right after the 1992 civil unrest. Now, I'm new. I'm like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. Oh my gosh, I'm in, direct services, social, whatever, right? And I'm talking to Geeti, and it was really because Amber Wynn didn't know what she was doing. I'm that type of person. I'm just going to ask questions because I want to do the best. So I talked to her monthly. Hey, Geeti, guess what? We just graduated 15 new, people from our program. They were, they were gangbangers or whatever. I would invite her out to our events. She came every once in a while. I would introduce them. I was like, don't be acting a fool because this is my program officer. This is Geeti. They were like, hey, Miss Geeti, you want some water? You want some Kool-Aid? And she'd laugh. And so she got to know the program. I would always send her success stories. I would send her pictures so that she can put into her presentations. She never had to ask me. I always gave her good news. You know why? Because invariably there was going to be some bad news. Because there was. As I said, invite them to events, send them swag. Geeti worked for the government, so we couldn't give them anything like personal because it's against like government rules. But like nonprofits and small foundations, give them some swag. Give them a sweatshirt, give them a t-shirt, give them a mug. Let them know, hey, we're over here. We see you. Let them know that you're not just coming to them for money. Send thank you notes from participants. Those always go over well. If you have special little kids, get a photo and then have them sign it or do little thank you notes, those go over well. They tend to put them in their foyer so people can see or whatever. When you have any event, even if they don't really cover it, publicly acknowledge them and say, thank you to our community partners, so-and-so, so-and-so. If it weren't for you, this program wouldn't be flourishing, whatever. Give them a certificate of appreciation, costs $1.50, bam. They're going to put it up and say, we're acknowledged. So it's just important that you maintain that relationship with your program officer. Don't be afraid of them. A part of their job and their role is to work with the nonprofits just in case there's any issues, to get those issues resolved before we get to this part right here. The foundation of effective compliance is reporting, right? The key element of effective compliance is oversight and defined reporting. I emphasize defined reporting because if it's not defined, it's just made up, right? Number one, reporting plays a vital role in creating and fostering a culture of compliance within the organization. There is a culture, right? Either it's a culture of compliance, meaning there's a culture of documenting and tracking, or it isn't. And having been a program officer, I can tell organizations who have a culture of compliance, right? They'll say, oh, you need some more internal controls, right? That means that there is no culture of compliance. It sets the tone that compliance is the responsibility of all employees. everything from when a person comes in, making sure that they sign in, to when they go out, making sure that evaluations are sent. That is a culture, right? And it also keeps the lines of communication open so that you understand things have to be tracked. Now, in my organization, when we had our staff meeting, I made it clear, this is the reason why you need to make sure people sign in. We have to prove to our funder that we are actually serving people. If we don't have proof, they are not going to fund us, which then means you don't get a check. Like, I would just keep it like just that simple, because people would be like, okay, then you just don't get a paycheck. Like, it's just real. This is the relationship between our funding and your paycheck. And so every staff meeting, I would go over the things that, either we were dinged on during our audit, or it was a challenge for my downline staff to give me. Like, when we're doing the reports, I'm like, all right, so let me see your ledger for discretionary funds or petty cash. They're like, oh yeah, we don't have receipts. We don't have receipts. We can't get reimbursed. There is a problem. So those are the things that I would constantly, drill into my staff when I was executive director. Compliance is important, right? And we talk about defined reporting. Wait, let me pause. Any questions? Y'all know I can just go on forever. Any questions? None? Okay. If I'm going too fast, if I'm saying too much, just say Amber, and then I'll stop. Okay. Intentional and structured. What I mean by that is that it is defined. It is driven by the promises made in your proposal, right? So typically what happens is when you win an award, they give you what's called an agreement. And in that agreement, they outline what they are promising in exchange for these dollars. I've had people say, no, I didn't get that. Are you sure you didn't get that? Are you sure? Because typically a funder has to have that because it's legally and binding. And that is what you will use to then guide how you're going to do your reporting. In the agreement, it should outline who your target audience is, what is the geographical service area that you are committing to serve, what's the grant period, what are your goals, and how the goals will be achieved. The reason why this is in the agreement is because at the end of your grant period, when you submit your report, and in the proposal, when you said we're going to serve this geographical area and we see zip codes outside of that geographical area, as the funder, we say, we can't, this is not what's in your agreement. We said we would cover the costs for people in this zip code because as a funder, we're saying to the IRS, we are covering this area. So we're only funding people who are covering the same area. So if you say, but we served, 200 people. Yeah, but of those 200 people, only 50 were in the geographical service area. So you're not in compliance with the agreement. Those are the things that your program officer is going to be looking for when they do the audit. It's no secret and it's no surprise because it has been identified in your agreement. So that's where we're going to start, right? We're going to start with what you agree on, because they send you the agreement, you sign it, you're so excited, oh, we got the award, send it off, get the money, right? But you got to read the agreement, right? Because here's the thing, in order for you to deliver on your promises, you have to put them front and center. Because a funder is not really concerned about your expenses. They're really concerned about accomplishing their goals. They pick you to partner with them, but at the end of the day, what you do needs to allow them to say to their board, to their funders, we are accomplishing our goals. If, as the American Heart Association, their goal is to end, heart attacks or whatever, they're going to partner with all of these small nonprofits to do checkups and whatever. The purpose of partnering with them, yes, ideally is to end heart attacks, but at the end of the day, you need to report to them that they're getting out the education and awareness, that they're doing the blood pressure checks and all of that, so that they can then report back that they are doing what they're supposed to do. All right. So when you said in your RFP that you're going to serve 200 people, then you need to prove it. How do you prove it? Sign-in sheets, ticket sales, social media, newsletter, presentation, emails. You got to justify it. When you say that you're going to change a behavior, no longer will these people, I don't know, do drugs or, be in that element. You have to prove that. How do you prove it? Testimonials, videos, pre and post surveys, evaluations, observations by the case manager, correlations. What do I mean by correlations? Well, if you know the recidivism rate is typically 30% for people who come out, but your clientele, the recidivism rate is 10%, then you can make that correlation. Skills increased. How do you do that? How do you prove that? Well, the learning objectives from your curriculum, you're going to have tests, right? Well, when they first started, they had no knowledge. Now they've got 90%, 98% on these tests. So that's a skill that they've learned. Surveys, testimonials. How do you know that they have the skills? Because they've been placed in these jobs, right? They've been promoted into new roles. Knowledge increase, pre-post surveys, testimonials, videos, evaluations, observations, data, correlations. This is what your funder wants to see. You said in your proposal, yes, we are the next best thing to sliced bread. Great, let me see the butter, right? So when we talk about delivering on your proposal promises, it starts with what you promise in your proposal for the RFP. Then they just recapture that in the agreement. Now you have to deliver that. I've had people say, oh, I didn't get refunded. And I'm looking at, what they submitted in terms of their reports. I'm like, why are you telling them about the toy drive that you had? You didn't get grants to do a toy drive. You did grants to do, workforce development. Like, this is irrelevant and it's not in alignment with what you're doing. Well, I just thought they'd want to know. No, they don't. They don't want to know. And your program officer certainly doesn't want to know, because if it has nothing to do with this agreement, then you're adding on time that she has to weed through all of this other stuff. What did you say? Show me how you accomplish what you said you were going to do. Any questions about that? Yes.
Not so much a question, but a comment. I think when I first started doing this work, I was very ambitious in terms of the number of people that we were, going to serve. And when you start working with human beings and you start recruiting them for an 8-week program that they have to commit to, and they are formerly incarcerated adults, you don't get the numbers that you're hoping for, because the reality is that people have lives and they have other things they have to do. And it takes a lot of commitment to do an 8-week, 32-hour program for adults, and especially adults whose lives are unstable. And so one thing I've learned over time is to be more realistic about the numbers of people I'm going to serve, and to explain, like in each class, we usually say our goal is to graduate 15 people, because that's been about the average, right?
Out of how many, Aubrey? 15 out of how many?
We usually have 25 to 30 sign up. We usually have about 20 show up. And then by the time everything's said and done, we may have like 11 to 15 that actually graduate from the program. But we explain that in the grant reports. We explain that these are the barriers to people participating, and these are all the things we're doing to mitigate those barriers. But the fact of the matter is there's still lots of shame and stigma around mental health and incarceration. And so we just, every time we're learning more and doing more so that we can recruit folks and that we can keep them on board. But I think being realistic about that and being honest about that with our program officers has been the best thing, because then we don't have to you know, try to make miracles happen that are just not realistic. And
Yep.
then we also don't have to feel like, oh, we're not being honest because, you know, the very first time we ever did the program, we said we are going to serve 45 people. When we didn't have the numbers at the end, we tried to run this like one-time workshop
To
just so
get the
we could
numbers.
register
Yep.
people, you know, and then you're not being honest, and it
Yeah.
doesn't feel good about it. And, you know, it's like, just, no, I'm not saying set your bar low, but be realistic about what the numbers of people that you're going to serve will be, and be able to explain why that is.
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Aubrey. And it's important to understand that your funders who are funding your work are also a part of this environment, right? So they know the barriers, they know, you know, if you're saying 45, they're like, bet you know your people. But if you said 15, it's because they know, they understand the population that you're dealing with. Roger?
Hi, how you doing, Amber?
Doing well.
So, you know, you were mentioning about how Latino Coalition brought you in on this. In our case management with Late Latino Coalition, we have to track many of the things that you're talking about, which includes jobs, employment, housing. They got 90-day retentions. We have to track that in there. 90-day retentions on housing, education, employment. Also, we have in there the activity services that we do, direct services with them, whether it's getting them a job, whether it's taking them somewhere, whether it's ID identification. They got a whole field that comes up that they have us to choose from, and we have to do a minimum of 90 in our funding per year. And so we have to do a lot of direct services, but then in behind that, we also do a lot of mentoring, coaching, peer recovery coaching, stuff like that. So one of the things that we're doing, we implemented a few months ago, was those surveys to the participants.
Yeah.
Midterm and then post-term surveys. And any testimonials that they have, we try to put them up in the buildings and as well as into the before the funders.
Yeah.
Because the funders want to know, like you said, what impact are we having?
Yeah.
The better we can do it, maybe even some pictures of the care worker along with the participant, if they're willing, to show them, hey, here's the care worker with the participant, and here's their success story. And we give them certificates of success upon completion, where they finally come to a place of self-actualization and stable housing.
That's amazing. And I'm just going to throw in there, when you do the pictures, don't do pictures of them holding certificates.
No, it's just,
no, I'm just saying in general to everybody on the line, do not send your funders pictures of people holding up certificates. It is the most irritating thing. You could have grabbed 6 people off of the street and have them hold up pictures of certificates. What we want to see are you in action. They're called engaged photos. If they are learning how to do interview tips, take pictures of them, you know, like a person pretending like they're doing interviews. If it's skills, have them on the machines, have them, whatever it is that you're teaching them, that's what you want to send to your officer. I can't tell, if I get one more photo of people holding up certificates, what does that mean? That means nothing. Same for your website. Put photos of what it is that you're teaching, right? If you're teaching them a new skill, if you're teaching them, you know, like in a group session, right? Like a focus group, you know. I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it because you guys are my family. If there is a moment when you can capture a tear, I'm telling you, like, get that, you know, when the bros are hugging, you know, like, that's what's going to make a program officer put that on the board and go, this is where your money's going. This is meaningful. Look at this engagement. Them holding up certificates, man. Okay.
so,
yeah, Roger.
Yeah, so when we do flaggers training, and we have Oculus trainings for various different certified. I got 23 different careers that they can do. So if we went in, I guess if you're in that, that's a great idea. Go in and take pictures of them in the classes.
Yes.
And in the Oculus training and put that out.
Yes, that's what we want to see, because that's what our money's going for. We don't come out and see it. So show us what you're doing. That's what we want to see. All right. So when we talk about setting it up, structured, intentional, this is what I mean. When you have a grant agreement, it's going to look something like this. 1 year beginning January. I pulled it from 2012, but you get the feeling. What is it that you're committing to? What you told them is that you will identify, preserve wildlife habitation in upstate New York. That is what you then have to deliver on, right? Through the promotion of ecosystem conservation, sound management, and the preservation of sustainable natural landscapes. So when you give your report, don't say that you're going to now report out on the mitigation of pollution. That is nowhere in the project description. You said conservation, you said sound management. So you're just feeding back to your funder what it is that you said that you're going to do. If they don't give you a template, if they don't say go into this portal to report out, then you take your agreement and you take the language in A through H and you shoot it back. People come to me all the time, Amber, I've got a an end of year report due and I don't know what I'm reporting out on. I'm like, really? What did you tell them you were going to do? That's what you report out on. Let me see your agreement. I don't have one. You have one. You have one. Just go look for it. I said, when they awarded you something, did you sign up? Yeah. I'm like, give me that award letter. And then we would back into creating that report. So
Amber, so
yes,
this is Gail with Lifeline. So I totally understand that, and I'm glad you're bringing that up because the narrative that we submit in a grant is the narrative we need to follow. And I
uh-oh, you froze.
I think that's really an important point to point out because that is, one thing I'm in finance, but we're always saying, does it align with the narrative? Does it align with what we wrote in the grant? When we have to pay something, when somebody wants to go purchase something, like, does it
line up with that budget line item? Does it?
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Very important. Thank you.
It is extremely important when we talk about compliance because let's just say you were given $250,000 by the Amber Wynn Foundation. And for some reason, the government grant didn't come through because it's reimbursable, whatever. And your executive director says, well, let's just borrow some. No, we're just going to move some money over here from here. No, because in finance, this is the reason why it is important that you understand what a funder's looking for. When they ask you for the income statement, when they ask you for the statement of X, Y, and Z, the reason why they're asking you for those particular pieces of documentation is because they can see how money is moved. They can see where money is coming from. That is what they're looking for. They're looking to see if you are mismanaging their funds. You can't take this money and move it over here until this money comes. You can't do it. We're going to talk about what to do in those situations in a minute, but it is directly linked to what it is you said you were going to do, how much you said it was going to take to do it. And I'm going to show you what to do when hiccups happen, because life happens all the time. And I have become so good at leveraging my challenges and barriers to get more money. I'm going to show you what to do in those instances. But thank you for confirming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So when we talk about intentional, there's such a thing called the client journey, right? And that's really what I want you to start to look at. What is your client's journey? Because when you're reporting out, you want to be able to tell your funder this story. Now, I have it broken down into, I think it's like 4 sections, right? So you start with the award date and you want to be able to create these milestones. So in stage 1, okay, we're going to let you know on July 1st whether or not you got the award. That's the award date. Okay, great. So you've been awarded. The first thing you want to do is set up your folder. So the documents review. And this is what you do. You say, okay, our program is going to start in September. So you start to set up your folder. You bring your team together and you say, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up the folders. We're going to make sure that we have milestone 1, which is the program orientation, individual program plan. That's the top is for your clients. The bottom is for your organization. For step 2, okay, you've got these folders set up. You don't want to wait until the end to find out that they were not set up accurately. So you or your program manager who's responsible for the program want to do a spot audit review. You may not want to go through all of them, but you want to say, okay, we decided this is what these folders we're going to look at. Pull out 5. Pull out one from the beginning, one from the middle, one from the end, whatever. Randomly, give me A, L, and Z, whatever. And you want to make sure that the folder, the way that it's set up, will allow you to provide quality reporting. And then you also want to have a budget meeting. You're going to say to your people, okay, in terms of allocation, we've got $3,000 per participant. This is how it can be spent, right? So milestone 2 is the halfway mark. And in the halfway mark, you want to make sure that your participants are meeting their program goals. You don't want to get to the end and be like, oh my goodness, by this time, half of our program participants should have, gotten their IDs and should have gotten their driver's license, should have gotten at least one tattoo removed. Like halfway, you still have the opportunity to salvage the program. But let me tell you, if you're trying to do things the last 30 days before that report, baby, talk about some stress. I've done it because, as Aubrey said, you're not going to turn in a report. You're going to try and, do whatever, but it is stressful. So if you have these milestones set, you have dates that, okay, we're going to do a check-in. We're going to look at these, where we are in terms of hitting these goals. It is going to save you a lot of stress, which is my concern for you guys, but it's also going to powerfully position you so that you can get refunded, right? So now we're at stage 3. This is when you're meeting with your partners. If you have any subcontractors and they're supposed to do something for you, you want to meet with them. You don't want to wait until the end. You're going to say, hey, you guys said that you were going to, do job placement. Show us where you are, right? You're going to do another spot audit review. You're going to do another budget meeting because you want to make sure that if you have to make any program modifications, that you're doing them now. You're going to say, you don't have enough receipts. You need to go back, do these waivers. You need to go back, right? And this is where you say to your funder, hey, we're in 3rd quarter. Doesn't look like we're going to make it. So I would like to request a no cost extension, or may we please reallocate this line item because X, Y, and Z happened. For example, during the pandemic, we said we're going to meet in person. And when we met in person, we were going to do food and da-da-da. That didn't happen. May we reallocate that funding into like more time for our job placement. We want to give, our partner more money to do job placement. That is the time you request that. You don't just take money and move it. You have to get permission to use it for something else. And then the last stage is, right, it's the final. It's sink or swim, people. It's like you're getting ready to go into this audit or you're getting ready to do this report. For the client, they should be culminating, they should be graduating, they should be doing all that. But for you, you should be lining up your budget, making sure you spent all of the money that you said you were going to spend and putting together that final report. So when we talk about intentional, when we talk about structure, this is how it's laid out. Yes, you have your program goals. Yes, but you should also have your organization goals. What's going to happen at this time? What should we see in terms of output? And in terms of compliance, doing these little spot checks are going to help you really tighten up before it's too late. Any questions about that? All right. So when we talk about documentation, we've got things like client intake application forms. We've got sign-in sheets. We've got case notes. Excuse me. These are the things that your program officer, if they're not the person who's going to do the audit, these are the things that we're looking for to justify whether or not you actually served people, right? Because we're going to do spot checks and we're going to look, okay, you said you served 250 people. Let me see if there's 250 complete applications. You said you served this geographical area. I'm going to go to the applications and I'm going to look at the zip codes. But we need to have the documentation there, right? So case management notes, sign-in sheets, those are critical to prove that you actually served people in your community. When we talk about structured, this is old school. I don't know how many of you still have folders, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to keep your records accurate by standardizing the process. If you have multiple grants, my recommendation is color code your folders. You know, you got a grant from the Latino Coalition, that's blue. You got a grant from Amber Wind, that's green. You got a grant from, so that you can keep your programs separate. And just by looking, you can see which program is funded by which funder. Does it take a little time? It does, but I guarantee you when it comes down to compliance, it's going to save you. And if you're like, Amber, we don't use no, you know, hard copy folders, you can do it electronically, right? Just allocate a color for it, right? So program 1 may be the Latino Coalition, program 2 may be Amber Wind, program 1 is going to be purple, program 2 is, they will allow you to do that. I'm saying this because when you are intentional and structured, when it comes down to it, if you have any crunches, you know, this is being tracked. You also have chart of accounts, but it really takes a person to understand what a cost center is and chart of account. But when they're color coded, it's kind of like no brainer for people. So you want to make it easy, you know? But when we talk about structured and intentional, every participant in this program's folder is going to be set up a certain way. This is what we're talking about with the client journey. You get your agreement and you say, what are the things we're going to have to report out on? We're going to have to provide a copy of the application. What can an auditor look for and get from the application? Well, we said we're going to specifically deal with men. The application, it has a little thing that says, are you male, female, non-binary, cis? You know, all of that is right there on the application. They can verify it. You said you were going to serve, you know, people from 17 to 24. They can find that on the application. So you want to be able to make it so where it's easy for your program officer to find the information, have it set up the same way. You don't want, you know, what Roger to have and his folders to be different than what Aubrey has versus what Leslie has. You want them to be standardized, because having been a program officer, I'm just going to tell you the truth. When you have to go through 16, 17 folders and they're all set up differently, you start to get pissed. And when you're pissed, you're just checking things off, right? It's just human nature. I hate to admit that, but it's true.
So Amber, so what you're saying, you know, I like this process that you're presenting. And so what you're saying, it's very crucial that we keep our files similar with all the same documentation. So it's a no-brainer when a program officer comes in.
Yes. So
okay.
On the inside, you may have your intake form. So there's a flow when they first come in. So when you open the folder, you say, oh, okay, this is their intake form. This is their application. Then after that, you know, maybe there's a program plan, right? Roger talked about these 90 days or these whatever steps. Put it in there so that your program officer or the person who's doing the audit can see, okay, here's the flow. This is how copies of their certifications. We're saying that they're graduated. You know, we've taught them, they've participated in these 3 trainings. So you're going to give them certificates. Just make a black and white copy, put it in the folder so that they can prove that skills were learned, right? That behaviors were modified. So case notes, right? You could put those right there so that, you know, if someone says, well, you know, they've been absent, you know, and I went to check up on them, somebody died, or, you know, da-da-da-da-da. So when they're reading them, they can see, oh, here's some of those barriers that they talked about. It has been documented, right? And you want to do things like receipts. This is important. When I was doing workforce development and job placement, whenever we sent them out on, you know, an interview, we did things like we gave them, this was back in the 90s, so we didn't have Uber and stuff like that, bus passes, right? So we got copies of the receipts that we purchased them for the bus passes. Some of them we had to buy them clothes. We would actually, you know, go down to the store. So we connect those receipts onto inside of the documentation. All of those allowable expenses are in this participant's folder. So when you do the audit, when you do your report, literally, you can put out 6 of your folders and you know which section it is. You're like, okay, we need to make sure that we have the accurate count for the people who have graduated. You know which flap it is. You pull them out, check 1, check 2, check 3. It's very manual, but if your folders are all set up the same way, it's going to go quicker. And if you have an audit, it's going to endear your program officer to you. There's no other way to say that. What else?
Thank you for that, Amber. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You see here on the little flap, when we talk about tracking, the last name, first name, and then the name of the grant and the year. When you're pulling files for your auditor, it's easier when you have a system. Okay, we know this is when Amber, she was in our build program 2023, or she was in our catalyst program. Now it may be funded by the same funder, that's why it's blue, but you know, this one was in this training program and this one was in this training program. Just trying to think ahead on how it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So how does a nonprofit deliver on a funder's request for proof of eligibility? Here's the thing. At the end of the day, in order to be eligible for funding, you have to justify the need, right? You have to demonstrate your fiscal viability. What are the measurable outcomes? They're looking for business resiliency and they're looking for leadership governance. If you don't have these things, then we're not going to consider you for funding. Because if you don't have these things, number one, if you can't justify your need, then why are we funding you, right? But if you don't manage your money right, if you can't say at the end of this program, here's what you're going to see. If we don't think that, you know, you have enough unrestricted fund, you're not going to get funded. And it's just important to understand these things and understand that how do you get to them? It's through your systems. Now, ideally, some of those systems are going to be automated. But if you're grassroots and you don't have the funding, then they're going to be manual. But at the end of the day, you are able to give funders the proof that they need through your systems. So when they ask you for 2 years of audited statements, they want to know, can you manage money? It doesn't have to be $8,000 in your account. You could have $500 in your account. What they're looking for is that at any given time, you can tell them where their money is. At any given time, you can tell them how much of their money you spent. At any given time, you can tell them where that money was spent. So when we talk about tracking and reporting, it's important for after you get the grant, for sure, but it's also important for how you get the grant, right? So your budget, your expenses, your financial statements, those are important for tracking and documenting, but also for your program. How do you demonstrate impact? Through your activities and your partners. And when we talk about sustainability, you've got to be able to prove that you hit your goals. What type of objectives did you use to hit those goals, the deliverables, and how you use the funding. It all comes down to your systems. Listen, at the end of the day, your funder is looking for certain things for your closeout reports. It's unfair, but first thing we're looking for is discrepancies, right? We're looking for, can you demonstrate impact? Can we replicate this? We don't want to keep funding the same, different programs. We want to find something that works, and then we want to replicate it. So if you can prove that what you do works, we're going to say, great. Now we want to put this, if this works in a rural area, and that's what we focus on, we're going to take what you do and we're going to put it in another area because you've demonstrated that it works. So we're really looking for replicability. But most of all, at the end of the year, we're looking that you delivered on your proposal promises. You said, like Aubrey said, you said you were going to work with 25 people. Can you deliver on that? That's what we're looking for. The way that you do this is by keeping your records accurate. Hard copies of receipts, right? An accounting system that tracks transactions. Especially for my small grassroots a dedicated bank account. I've had people say, well, we don't get that much money, so I just use it in my own personal account. Oh, don't say that. Please don't say that. Because what happens, even though you don't have a lot of money coming up, it opens it up. They're like, what do you mean you bought 3 bundles of hair out of here? Well, it's my personal account. So then they're going to say, well, what else did you buy? Well, we got somebody edged up and lined up, but they weren't on that sign-in sheet. It just opens up opportunities for them to start questioning you. So you want to have your own dedicated bank account, but you want to be able to produce a statement of income, a profit and loss statement, balance sheet, bank statements, right? Now, I will tell you, I think I'm pretty badass. I do. But when it comes to statements of incomes, profit and loss statements, you know, your girl starts to shrink, right? That's just not my area of expertise. But having been an executive director, I know what they're for. Generally accepted accounting practices. This is how your funder is able to standardize whether or not you're doing the right things according to like accounting practices. So if you are like me and you're not big on numbers and you don't have to know how to do it. You just need to know what it means. So like a statement of income is might be for, don't have me up here lying, a specific period of time, whereas the profit and loss statement is for the whole grant period. So as an executive director, it is or even as a program manager, if they're giving you a budget to manage, you need to know what these things mean because you're going to have to produce them. Now, your bookkeeper should help you to allocate where the funding goes and how it's spent, but you are responsible for helping your bookkeeper, right? It's not just you throw them a whole bunch of receipts. No. On those receipts, you're going to say it's for this grant, this number, right? And when we say this number, it's okay, 200 is for payroll, 300 is for tattoo removal, 400. So on those receipts, you're going to put, you know, the Latino Coalition -400. And then your bookkeeper can then go into the system and say, oh, okay. So, you know, all of Aubrey's people, here's her thing, and she allocate, and then that's how they can determine how much money was spent on that line item. So when we talk about building a culture of compliance, it's putting those things in order. It's not enough just to have the receipts. You have to be able to tell your bookkeeper what line item is this money going to be taken away from? You know what I mean? So guess what? There are accounting software that can help you do that. Most people use QuickBooks. QuickBooks makes me cry. It's just too complicated. I can't. But whatever system you have is whatever system you use. But if you are a small grassroots nonprofit and you haven't created a system, I'm going to introduce you to Wave Apps because it's what I use as a consultant. And if it's Amber proof, trust and believe you can do it. Because as I said, it makes me cry. I talked a little bit before about a chart of accounts. A nonprofit chart of accounts is where you, what's the best way to explain it? This is how you say to your funder, this is where the money was allocated. If you look at number 3 on the first column, it says payroll taxes, right? So payroll taxes has a number of, the code is 7250. 7250, whenever payroll is paid, the bookkeeper is going to see 7250. So when she goes to do the quarterly report, she's going to say, this is how much was spent on payroll taxes. So it's important that you have these systems in place because without these systems, you won't be able to report out to your funder. So people are like, why do they have to be audited? You know, 2 years of audited statements, because they want to know for a fact that somebody who knows what they're doing, not a Amber Wynn, can say, yes, this is set up accurately and this information is true, right? Oh, I had the little thingy there. Oh, Amber, you're just getting ahead of yourself. So this is how you're able to track when they're doing a report, where the monies went and how they were allocated. So when you look at the different forms, so for example, a statement of financial position or a statement of activities or a statement of activities expenses, this is what a funder is looking for. 1530 is equipment. So let's just say you needed a photocopier because you're making copies of IDs, certificates, or whatever. They're going to allocate that to 1530, right? 4130 is special events, ticket sales. So all of these numbers have meaning. And when you have these systems in place, when you run them for your funder, they can track where those expenses were. So it's important. Remember, we talked about payroll taxes. They come as FICA, Medicare, SSI on your budget. Now, most of you probably don't charge for that, which you should, but this is how they're able to say, okay, so program one, they didn't charge us. So it should not be on that financial statement. They're going to look at your budget and they're going to say, they didn't allocate any, money for payroll taxes. Why is this coming out of this financial statement? That is what your funders do. So when we talk about intentional, structured, tracking, these are how we are able to determine whether or not there's mismanagement of funds. You didn't put this on your original budget, yet and still, when we get these financial statements, we see that it was allocated for that. And this is how we tracked it, through these generally accepted accounting practices. Now, when they ask for, these specific type of documents, right? A balance sheet, this is what they're looking for, right? Equipment and furniture, 14,000. Was that on your budget? Because if it wasn't on your budget, it shouldn't be on this document. So it's why you have to have systems in place that's going to allow not only the funder, but you to say, this is where the money was allocated. Here's the other thing. I told you a little bit about starting, right? When you start and they're looking for eligibility, funders look for it. They ask for a copy of your budget. They ask you for a copy of your most recent audited financial statements. They ask you for a 5-year trend of your, total revenues. And then, the 5-year trend for the change in all of that stuff comes from having a system. Now in Wave, you can go in there and you can put in, you just literally click January 1st, 2023 to December, and it'll go and you can pick which type of, do you want a profit or loss? Do you want a financial statement? And it'll give you what they're asking for. So you want to have a system in place that will allow you to be compliant. And when we talk about tracking, so if you guys haven't noticed, a lot of the receipts, they have this material where it just fades. So what I recommend, if you're using Wave, it's connected, but you can take your phone and take a picture of the receipt and it goes into the system. If QuickBook has that, then use that as well. But when we talk about tracking and receipts, you want to be able to keep everything in one system so that your bookkeeper can say, okay, so they went out, they bought the person, clothes for the interview, you scan the receipt and it goes into your system. Right? Back in the 90s, our system was putting them in a folder or putting them in an envelope, bringing them back to the office, giving them to the administrative assistant who had to then, line them up for each program. Now we have technology that will allow you to do that. And we also have systems that will allow you to store it, right? You need a one-stop location for storing and accessing information. You want to make sure that your platform is secure and responsive, typically cloud-based, that provides alerts, that stores all of your documents in one location. Some people use Google Drive. Google Drive isn't encrypted. I didn't know if you guys knew that or not, but they're going to ask you for things like, give us a copy of your 501c3, your mission statement, your program description. You want to have that in one location and not like in a folder over here and a folder over there. You want to be able to be responsive. So it goes back to being able to store your things. And when we talk about compliance, as a program officer, I can tell you when people miss deadlines, people miss opportunity to renew their grants. And you're like, oh, I'm doing so much work. Right. You want a system that can say, hey, Amber, your report is due June 1st. So you're going to put your timeline to start working on that May 15th. Google Drive doesn't do that. Salesforce will do that. This system that I use is called Small Biz Pro. It's expensive for me. It's like $79 a month for me. But the reason why I like it is because like for my certificates, they're due and they'll let you know 30, 60, 90 days out. So if you have Salesforce or if you have a system, you want that system to remind you because you guys are busy. You're actually delivering services. But what you don't want to do is miss a deadline. It is not okay for you to submit your report a day, a week late. It's just not a good look. Remember, you want to submit it early. So for you, you put it in there that it's due May 15th so you can start working on it so that you can turn it in early because we're cultivating relationships, remember? How do you make sure that compliance happens? You can't leave it to chance. You need to designate someone to manage the process and create those regularly scheduled monthly or quarterly meetings like I had on that timeline where you check in. Why? Because you want to report out on the key performance indicators. Where are we? You know, if you are like 80% at your goal, you're good. If you're at 10%, then you know you need to do something to fix that. You'll only get that done if someone is designated to do it. And I'm telling you that it shouldn't be you as the executive director because you're supposed to be doing big picture. So if you've got program coordinators, program managers, that should be their task. Make sure that they're reporting out on the budget. Make sure that they're doing spot checks on the outcomes, and make sure that they're reporting out on any challenges, right? It is the role of the program director. Now, some of you haven't gotten to that level, but I'm just putting it out there to check in with the program manager and say, hey, I see that you haven't submitted your receipts. So then the manager then will report to the program director who's over all of the programs. And then come the end of, the reporting period, everything's tight. You may have to tweak a couple of things, but at the end of the day, you're not starting from scratch. Now, Aubrey had to jump off, but this is where I am on impact reporting. Promise low, deliver medium. People say, oh, promise low, deliver high. No. Promise low, deliver medium, right? I told you the nonprofit funding community is small. It is so easy for you to lose credibility. Negative reports spread quickly, and your organization can develop a bad reputation, which is what we don't want you to do. And your poor reputation is going to affect your ability to get funding. So deliver medium. Why do you want to deliver medium and not high? If you can do this amount of work with this amount of money, then why should I give you more money? So you want to say, hey, we can, do this 20% and maybe you deliver 25%, but you don't want to promise 20% and then do 50%. It ends up biting you at the end. So promise low, deliver medium. You want to deliver medium because you want them to see you have initiative, you can, deliver on things, but you want to create a fundable demand. So let's just say with Aubrey's numbers, she can honestly say 15. I would then promise 10, right? Because that gives you a little wiggle room to deliver a little bit more. But if you don't, you're safe. And here's the thing. I would say, yeah, we can deliver on 10, but we still have a waiting list of 5. If we had more money, that's how I look at, my funding challenges. But if I provide services for all 25, they're getting the win, right? So if I say I can deliver on 10, but if I had more money, I could really do 25. I try to create a fundable demand. When you start off young, you're new in the game, like Aubrey said, you're ambitious, you learn quickly. Now, I wanted to quickly talk about spending the money because this is huge, right? Grant savings is not a good thing, unfortunately, right? Grant savings from a funder is an indicator of mismanagement and a lack of need. If you ask for $80,000 this grant period, and at the end of the grant period, you still have $20,000 left, when you go to reapply, I'm going to say, I'm not giving you 80,000, I'll give you 60 because you didn't spend that amount, right? So grant savings can prevent a successful resubmission, So you've just got to be on top of it. That's why during that timeline, we had budget check-ins too. It's easy to say, okay, guys, we have more than half of our budget that hasn't been spent. What is missing? Because at the end of that grant period, what you don't want to do is to try and hurry up and spend it in those last 30 days, because it's going to come out on your reports. It's going to come out that you did all of this massive spending at the end. So when we talk about reporting challenges, this is what you promised. You promised this Minnie Mouse cake, and this is what you're trying to deliver. Your your funder's like, what's going on here? All right, this is not you. One of the reasons why you want to establish a good rapport with your program officer is because mistakes happen. You forgot to put in the yeast, you forgot to put in the sugar, right? What you want is for them to pick up your call. If you only call them when you have a problem, they're going to be like, oh, there's that Amber Wynn. I'm going to let that go to voicemail. But if you are constantly talking to them and you're saying, hey, this is what happened, they're going to take your call. That's why you submit your reports early. That's why you provide them with wins, because challenges are going to happen. So you want to make sure that when it is a challenge, they'll be like, oh, you're good, because this is not typically who you are. The primary thing is you want to report the challenge before the due date. If your report is due on June 30th, don't be calling them up June 15th saying, we got problems. No. You report those back in February. Listen, we have an issue. We thought we were going to be able to get our kids into these parks. We didn't realize how many gang territories we were going to have to navigate. We can't have them walking through these, through these neighborhoods. And they're like, ooh, yeah, we allocated $2,500 for that. Is it okay if we use that money to rent a van so we can just drive our babies there and they can, so you want to explain the issue, frame it as a learning experience and an opportunity to resolve the issue. You always want to come with the solution. Don't come to your program officer saying, yeah, we got a problem. We didn't get to spend this money. We're so sorry. So the program officer is like, so what you gonna do, right? Come with the solution and do not change the costs. Keep the costs the same. So you can request a reallocation of funds. Never, ever, 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 ever spend monies or savings from one budget line item on another without written approval from your program officer. That is called mismanagement of funds. That can potentially, you'll have to pay money back that you've already spent. You may be placed on a list that's like, do not fund them because they mismanage funds. And in some cases, you can go to jail because that's mismanagement of funds. So the request would go something like this. Dear Geedy, the Institute for Nonprofit Management would like to request the reallocation of funds for the grant Increasing Nonprofits Founders Capacity for the period of June 22 to July 23. You want to put that in there because they have multiple programs going in. You don't want to be like, hey, Geedy, we didn't get to spend all the money. Can we reallocate it? First of all, who is we? Which program is it for? Don't have them do the work. Do the work for them. So they can be like, okay, bet we know the name of the actual grant. We know what the grant period is, right? We know how much it is. Our request is to reallocate the $2,500 line item for, so you're going to put what it was allocated for on your budget, board president travel stipends to fund what is the new thing now that it's going to fund. So due to COVID-19 stay-at-home mandates, we were not able to deliver in-person training sessions. We allocated stipends to incentivize our board to compensate them for their driving time. With the switch to online training, though, they didn't have to travel. So you've explained what happened, right? Now there's a need to further support busy executive directors with additional resources that have been proven to increase capacity, compliance. So now you're telling them, this is what we're going to use it for. This is going to be the impact. The cost for developing this said solution is how much? The same amount as the line item. What you don't want to do is to change the amount, not up, not down, because that's going to require accounting work. I don't care how you do it. You make it the same amount. From a funder's perspective, I'm like, bet. They fixed the problem. That's what you want, right? Both line items are program-related line items, and the development of this resource will take about 2 weeks, aligning with the implementation of the Founders Circle, where EDs will receive their resource packets. Please confirm receipt of this, request, approval or denial at your earliest convenience. You put your name, you put all of your contact information. Don't say, respectfully, Amber. Yeah, don't make her have to go look for your telephone number or your email. Make it easy for your program officer. Any questions about this? Take a screenshot of it. I don't care. All right. So that's what happens. Or if you ran into some barriers, it's fine. Request a no-cost extension. So this asks for more time to complete the program without receiving additional funds. So Aubrey had mentioned before that she didn't have enough people. She said she was going to, provide 45 people. She only had 25. What she could have done is requested a no-cost extension. Listen, we're having these barriers for whatever reason. We need to extend it another 6 months so that we can hit that goal. Funders are cool as long as you're not asking for additional money. You usually want to ask it at least 30 days prior to the end of the program, and it's going to look something like this, sort of like the other one. Dear Geedy, we'd like to request a no-cost extension for the grant, blah, 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 blah. The request is for 6 months with the project end date of December 31st. So you want to make sure that you specifically say when this extension is going to end. Don't just say, we need a 6-month extension. Then they've got to figure out the date. Put the date, put the name of the program, the period, and then your explanation. Well, due to the stay-at-home mandates, we weren't able to deliver in-person training sessions. So, now we want to do it because the mandates have been removed. Give the explanation. We believe this portion of the training is crucial to the success of the program, and this request is no additional money. It's just requesting additional time to implement the program. You ask them to confirm receipt, and you put all of your contact information. Take a screenshot of this one as well, because basically you can just, insert your organization, whatever. So this is how you salvage the program. You ask for a no-cost extension or a reallocation of funds. Now, when we talk about reports, I talked to you a little bit about what a funder wants. They want proof, right? Proof is sign-in sheets. Proof are surveys. Proof are evaluations. Proof are photographs. Proof are videos. So how do you get these things? Well, the sign-in sheets, you print them out and you put them at the front, or you have them, scan in or whatever. Surveys. But what's important is testimonials, right? Roger talked a little bit about having those embedded. They're easiest once you have them graduate from the program. Once they learn something, you want to catch them where they're hot, right? But if you do a survey, have like your last question be, like what was the best part of this program? And like if you do a Google form, they're going to say the best part of the program. That's your testimony. You don't want to wait until a day, a week, a month after, because they lose that inspiration. You want to catch them when they're inspired. You want to catch them when they're emotional. You want to catch them when they feel hope. If you want, bring out your phone and say, so talk to us about how you feel right now, right? Like with technology, you can do so much right now. So you want to make it easy. So when we talk about reporting, it's about data, but it's also documenting your proof. And that's why it's important that your testimonials answer specific questions. So you would say stuff like, what was your life like before this program? Or how much did you know about, I don't know, being a crafts person before now? Did you experience an aha moment during the training? Like you want to prompt them so you can get good information. Otherwise, they're going to say, yeah, it was an amazing program and I'm glad I participated in it. No. How has this training changed your belief and your ability to actually, take care of yourself and your family? and then they're going to answer that. So take a screenshot of these questions because you can tweak them, right? And then make sure that you get the type of answers. Don't leave it to chance. I would like to say people will say the right thing, but 9 times out of 10, they won't. So when we talk about reporting, yes, it's about the impact. Yes, it's about setting up your folders, and yes, it's about documentation, but it's also about showing your employers, your funders, that you actually made an impact. All right, it is 10:15, and I want to make sure that you guys can get your questions answered. If there's, because I've been talking a whole lot. Do you have any specific questions for me? At the end of the day, I also wanted to show you, if you you want a copy of this, you can email Mason at latinocoalition.org, and she has copies of all of the videos, not just this one. So if you weren't able to attend all of the other ones, you can actually get copies of this one. But I do want to stop and give you guys an opportunity to ask your specific questions of me. Are there any? Especially from the funder's perspective. People want funders to be rational and reasonable and all of those things. And I'd like to say that we are, but we are human. And so when I share, do this to make them happy, it's because having been in that space, I would say, oh, I would never do anything, but I have. I'm like, what is this crap? Why are you making me work to figure out if you did your job? And it just put me in a bad mood. But for those organizations that had things lined up and it was structured, they may have had some things that were wrong. And I'm like,
So Amber, Amber, this is Gail again. Is this going to be, I'd like to share this with some of the other finance team that didn't get on, or, our management team.
Yeah.
Will this be something we can like acquire later, your seminar that you just did, your training?
Yes. So
will you send us a link, or do we have to request a link?
You have to email Mason at the Latino Coalition for a copy, because they're creating a library for all of their members. But you definitely will be able to get access for it. Yeah. Because,
Well, I just want to say this was very, very informational on how far we already at Lifeline. Moni Lucero is the accounting manager, finance man, and I oversee everything. And we do try to adhere to all that. And we do know that everything has to tie to our narrative, and everything has to tie to our budget lines. And so I wanted some of the other people that have come on to understand that as well.
Yeah.
So that's why I was
really
asking
important.
if we could
and a lot
that.
of times people don't understand the background. And once you understand I'm telling you, when it comes to numbers, I'm like, they're like distant cousins. We see them at funerals and we see them at weddings, and that's about it. That's how I feel about my numbers. But when you understand what the purpose is, for me anyway, I'm like, yeah, okay. That's a cousin we didn't particularly care for because they always got drunk at the dang ceremonies, but it's our cousins, so we got to deal with them, right? So understanding what they're
right.
Yeah. What they're used for, how they're used,
right.
how they can be used against you in particular is really important.
Exactly.
For help.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything. You can ask me anything. No? All right. Well, we still have a few more sessions. If you can join me again next Thursday, I'll be here with my coffee, doling out more information to support the most amazing people on the planet. That will be you. So if you can, join me. If you can't, like I said, Mason is collecting all of these videos so that you guys can review them at your leisure, share them with your organization. I'm excited to be in partnership with Latino Coalition because they understand that, we have good hearts, we have good intentions, but sometimes we need some insider information that's going to help streamline processes, strengthen our leadership, move our organization forward. And I am so privileged to be able to provide some of my insider knowledge to help you guys operate, hopefully a little bit easier because you guys are doing all of this work. So thank you so much for spending your Thursday with me. Hopefully I'll see you next week. Have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you, Amber. Appreciate you doing this with us. Thank you.